We're here to talk about Borderlands 3. My name is Lloyd Hannison from the Stadia Cast. Joining me is Bill from the Stadia Cast. Bill, how you doing today?
I am all Borderlandsy all day.
All Borderlands all the time.
Yes, it's such a great game.
So we've talked a little bit about Borderlands in the past. I know Borderlands was basically on my Game of the Year list. I absolutely loved it. I've been a huge Borderlands fan um, from way back, basically playing the first one. But when we were talking about our games of the year and kind of chatting things over, you'd kind of paused at a certain place in the game. Kind of what happened and how did you get past that hump to then beat the game?
I just got distracted by other things. It wasn't so much that there was anything in Borderlands that stopped me. It was really more, oh look, shiny thing to distract me. Okay, I've moved past that shiny thing. Let's go back and try and mop things up in Borderlands. And honestly, I didn't realize how close I was to the end when I
Sure.
when I did it.
Yeah, it's one of those games where the ending really does kind of sneak up on you. You're spending all this time chasing down guns and shooting things that have funny names, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, this is the final or the penultimate boss battle, and then it's like, okay, I beat the game. What now? It really does kind of sneak up on you like that.
It did.
All right, cool. Well, let's jump into a little bit of the game. If people aren't familiar with Borderlands, it's basically a looter shooter. You are thrown into this post-apocalyptic world where you shoot a bunch of things, and they turn into loot pinatas, where you get one of like a trillion different guns. Basically, there's a whole pile of guns, and they all have random elements, and that's essentially the loop of the game. Is you're going through story missions where it's like fetch quests or go steal this thing or go shoot this guy in the butt, and then when you shoot things, guns just fly out of them, and you are basically taking the place of one of the four characters in the game. There's a siren who's named Amara. You have an operative character, which is kind of stealthy character named Zane. You have a beastmaster, so you're a big bulky dude with a beast with you named Flak, and then you have Mose, who's a gunner who basically has this portable turret mech thing that you can call in as your special. And you're basically just going through the game, finding weapons that work with your play style, but also the perks and the different skills that you've taken down the skill tree. So I played through the whole game, and I tried Flak, the Beastmaster, because it's similar to a Borderlands 2 character that I played, and it was like, I was okay. I tried the Siren character. I didn't really jump into the operative too much, but then I picked up Mose, and it immediately clicked with me. What characters did you play as mostly in this game?
I tried all four, but only glancingly. I really focused on Zane. Zane is fantastic, and one of the things that makes him unique is that he can have two abilities and not slot grenades, which I thought was really, really cool. So I ended up giving him the ability to make a little clone of himself where he summons a little digital clone to distract the enemy. And I summon up this little, I think it's called a sentry, where it flies around and shoots at enemies. And honestly, the best thing about the sentry is when it's targeting an enemy, it puts a nice yellow icon on it so that I can easily see them. I'm like, oh, there they are. Now I can shoot them. I think the same thing happens with Flak, but Zane is awesome because he can do things like swap places with his clone. So what I would do is I would drop a clone, I would charge into battle, get right up in everybody's face, and then hit my clone button again, and Zane and his clone would swap places, so now the clone is right up in everybody's face, and I'm off to the side, plinking away or flanking somebody like that. It's really cool, and I like how everybody plays differently.
Definitely, like all the classes are totally different. They all have different play styles. Mose, when you first started with Mose, you basically call in this mech and you basically jump into this big mech suit, and you have two weapons, and they can either be chain guns, one can be a flamethrower, one can launch missiles, depending on what you unlock in your tech tree. But then I was going down one of the trees, and I saw that there's a way that I could get out of my mech, and the mech stays around as just a turret that just shoots things. And it's like, oh, okay, this is a game changer. So I would do basically the similar thing that you would do with Zane. I would run into a bunch of enemies, call in my mech, get out of my mech, get out of dodge, and just like snipe people from over the hill. And my turret would be there, basically just blowing people up, and then I would clear rooms like that. And it just turned to be like just such a fun way to get into the game and play through some of the harder boss battles, because some of the boss battles get to be a little bit crazy in this game.
They absolutely do. Something else about the different characters is that you end up specializing down one of 3 trees for each character, and each tree feels very, very different. So one of the abilities that I pretty much never used was I could throw up a shield in front of me and use that. And I never really used that ability, but I know, like, from watching some YouTube videos about the best way to play as different characters, you can make a very, very tanky Zane by using the digital clone and the shield, or you can make your Zane be much more of a glass cannon, which is basically what I was doing, with very, very little defense and a lot more damage. And I know that the rest of the characters can also be specialized in different ways, which gives you a lot of replayability for this game.
Definitely. Replayability comes from the tech tree, the skill tree, depending on which character you are, but also the weapons that you're finding. Like, once you get to the high 50s, your level cap was just raised to 53. When you're playing in some of the arena type modes, you're getting legendaries that fly out of these characters, just like they're candy. And each of these legendaries can have special properties that really change the way you play the game. Like, I got a legendary sniper that does some crazy stuff, and it's like, okay, I'm a sniper user now. This is what I'm going to do. And I've seen some other things where there's like a machine gun that has different fire modes that just rotate. So you're basically you're counting your bullets almost as you're making your way through, but it does so much damage that people were choosing that weapon. So the game definitely allows you to kind of I don't know, take what you want to do in a first person shooter and have fun with it, but kind of spec in that direction, which is really cool.
I also really like the way that each gun manufacturer has something that is very much their thing. So my favorite gun manufacturer in the game, it took me a while before I figured this out, like, because I didn't really understand what Atlas meant, but that's my favorite gun manufacturer is Atlas, because what you can do is you can push I play with controller. So you can push down on the D-pad, and that swaps between smart bullets or a tracker puck. And by switching over to the tracker puck, I can shoot that at an enemy, and it sticks to that enemy, and then I can just run wherever I want and shoot, and the bullets will find their way to that tracker puck for the next 18 seconds. And if that target dies, the tracker puck will bounce off of them and go grab a hold of somebody else that happens to be nearby. And it's just really, really satisfying to hit somebody with a tracker puck and then just be running and shooting and watching the little red bullets go zipping back over to the tracker puck. It's super fun. Which manufacturer did you tend to gravitate towards?
I kind of went whatever had the best specs. Like, I moved through all of the manufacturers. I really like the Malawan guns. I love the SMGs that have shields on them, so you can basically run into a firefight and pop a second shield and then run away when that breaks. But I didn't really find there was one manufacturer that I really liked. I kind of used them all. There's an achievement for getting a care package for killing 100 enemies with each of the weapons, and I was able to get that without too much grinding. So I was switching weapons pretty much throughout the game. So it just shows how they've spent so much time making this game playable in so many different ways, because as you said, your tracker puck thing is really great, especially for bosses, because the weapon, if you mark the back of this huge ape that's running around and that's its weak point, you can now go in front of it and shoot, and your bullets will go around and hit the back of this ape. Which makes for some really, really fun boss battles that way. So we both played on Google Stadia. We both played it on Stadia. I played it on PlayStation 4 as well. So what did you think of the graphics? So I played mainly 1080p 60. I did try some of the 4K stuff, and it was like, I'd rather have 60 frames a second. But I gotta say, it looked really beautiful on Stadia. It looked better than the PlayStation 4 version, and it looked as good as any of the streamers that I've watched that are playing it on super beefy rigs. So what did you think graphically of how the game performed on Stadia?
I think it performs really well because it's 60 frames per second the whole time. And I was looking up, doing a little bit of research, and I guess the other consoles struggle keeping this game at 60 frames per second, even at 1080p. It would be nice if it were 4K and 60 frames per second, but that's not happening anywhere except for very, very expensive PC rigs. I thought that the game looked great. I feel like I'm surprised that the performance is so bad across the board. I'm not saying Stadia or I'm saying everywhere. The performance is pretty low across the board because, the reason that surprises me is because they went with an art style that it kind of flattens everything out and gets rid of a lot of detail. You would think that it would have been easier for them to maintain a higher frame rate. That being said, I streamed it a couple times on our YouTube channel, and people would come in and they were like, man, this is really smooth the way it's running. And it runs really smooth. However, I did on Stadia run into some glitches, and I don't think that they were Stadia glitches. I think that they were Borderlands 3 glitches where the game would completely freeze or hang up or I would get kicked out. But I mean, that's par for the course for video games when they get super, super complicated. That's just going to happen, whether you're on a PS4, an Xbox One, or Google Stadia, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree 100%. I used, as I said, Mo's. So when you get in and out of your mech, when I was playing on the initial release on Stadia, because when it first came out on Stadia, we were playing a very old version of the game. The PC version was updated for a couple patch levels that added a bunch of functionality and also a lot of speed and getting rid of a lot of that kind of jaggy camera stuff that was happening. But when I would get in and out of my mech on the first release, like the game would pause for almost a full second sometimes. And it was like really jarring. The most recent patch that came out when we got the Valentine's Day content and the Mad Moxie DLC made available on Stadia got rid of most of that stuff, but there is still the odd thing. Like when I go to Sanctuary and I go around a corner, the game pauses for a second as it's loading in all these assets. So I think most of those graphical issues and pausing issues are just from the engine streaming in all these like super high textures. Because even though the graphics themselves are cell shaded, they're using some pretty high textures behind kind of like the chunky black outlines and things like that to really make the game look really nice.
Yeah, I've also noticed that sometimes, and I'm assuming that this is an engine problem rather than a Stadia problem, but I could be wrong. I haven't played it on any other platform. I've noticed that sometimes part of the world will be rendered and another part will be unrendered. So, for instance, I will go to aim down sights on my gun and the whatever graphics that they use for my reticle or whatever won't be fully loaded in yet. And it will be all fuzzy looking and blurry. And I'm like, is that because of Stadia or is that because of you would think that because the game is running on a server someplace else and then streaming it to me, that it would render everything and then send it to me all at once. So I'm assuming that because part of it's rendered and another part of it's not, that's an engine problem and not a Stadia problem. But I don't know. I'm not an engineer.
What it is it's streaming in those textures, and it hasn't known that it needs them yet, so it doesn't load them in. But you'd think like the beefy server blades that these things are running on, they would just load in every texture and say, okay, we got all of it in memory, we're gonna not have any issues here. But yeah, I definitely noticed that as well when you do ADS on some of the weapons that have like fancy glow or weird reticules. It takes a while for that stuff to load in, which is jarring as well. But once you get in the game, once it's loaded that stuff, things seem to be pretty buttery smooth.
Does that happen on other platforms as well, since you played it on PS4?
Yeah, PS4 is
Okay.
pretty choppy most of the times, and it's even worse because you're playing 30 frames a second. At least on my stock PS4, that's what you're playing. So, like, when it's loading, it seems like the pauses are worse, just because of the control lag that you get from when it pauses and 30 frame a second update and all that other garbage that happens. 60 frames a second seems to curb some of that a little bit because it's taking more inputs, I guess. But yeah, it is pretty messy, and hopefully, they're pretty good at Gearbox is pretty good at updating this game constantly. So hopefully they're going to keep working on increasing the performance for those types of things.
So I don't want to spoil the story at all. I just want to get your general opinion. What did you think of the story in Borderlands 3, especially as somebody who's played Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2? Because this is my first Borderlands.
Sure. I really liked it. I love how they changed the fact that, yeah, you're in space and you're going from planet to planet instead of one big world. Previous Borderlands, you'd land and then you'd be going through a desert area, and it's like, okay, go to this place, and you go into the gate, and now you're in an ice area, which somehow was right beside the desert area, which didn't really make sense in the game, but it made getting around a little bit more confusing. The fast travel and the having all the different locations on separate planets really made it easy to kind of jump around, and having Sanctuary be a spaceship as your base of operations with everything that you need, the way to upgrade your stash, the way to upgrade your weapons, the way to sell your bank, like everything was all in there. Made it really easy to drop into the game, get a really cool weapon. It's like, okay, I want to bank this, pop back up to your ship, put it in the bank, and then go and take on another mission. The story itself was fantastic. I love how it ramped up. I love all of the celebrity voices that were in the game. Like, I don't want to spoil any of them because even though they did some videos on them, every single time I hit one of those celebrity voices, just like, oh my god, that's blah, this is amazing. And then they would have little bits about that person in the story itself, is lore or a specific weapon or an enemy name that was a play on those celebrities. Just so really well done. I loved the story from start to finish. Probably as good to me as Borderlands 2, which was my previous favorite. Borderlands 1 was okay. The pre-sequel was just really funny. But Borderlands 3 and 2, I think, are kind of tied there for top of kind of storytelling.
Yeah, and for me, I loved the story. I thought it was fantastic. I'm also very happy to be done with it. So now I can just put on some music, ignore all of the chatter that happens in the game now that I finished it, and just throw on some music and run through and loot and shoot over and over and over. I'm ready for the grind. It kind of drove me crazy that after I finished the game, it starts me back over and they're forcing me to kind of go through the story again. What would I think would have been a much better thing is if they had copied like Diablo 3, how they just have an adventure mode. And
Right.
I have to say, and you know, maybe we can't talk about this now because it'll take too long. But maybe after we get done recording, you can explain to me how you do all the little extra parts that you do after you finish it. What do you don't explain how to do all that stuff right now? But what do you think of all the post game, like the end game stuff?
I really like it. And so there's a lot of varied content that you can do over and over. There's they're all kind of horde mode based things. So there's kind of a horde mode where you're not in one area, you're going through a series of kind of like little battle arenas, making your way to the end. And then there's also a horde mode, which is a true horde mode where you're set in an arena and you start a wave or a round, and then waves of enemies will come at you as you make your way through it, which is pretty fantastic. So I really like that. I also love that multiplayer was done in such a way where like when I first started playing the game, I think either you were higher level or I was higher level. I can't remember which. And we were able to jump into each other's games. We're firing at the same enemies. There's no craziness like I didn't die or you didn't die because of character levels. They basically taken all that stuff and they balanced it, even to the point where I could play I could turn my game to easy, you could put your game on normal, and we're fighting the same enemies, and it just works. It's a pretty, I don't know, pretty ingenious way to do multiplayer. And the best part about it is now there's no issues finding multiplayer people. You can go to looking for group and just find a random party. You can go to the Run Jump Stomp Discord and jump into StadiaCast and find a group of people that want to take on Malawan or do one of the circles or whatever. And you don't have to worry. You don't have to say, "Oh, what level are you?" It's just the game figures it out, which is just genius. And and it just keeps the fun where it should be, which is on the screen. You don't have to take a pause and then figure out what you're going to do and wait for someone to level up for a couple levels. So the end game stuff, the multiplayer, it's done so well in this game, and you can play the whole story co-op or single player. It doesn't matter. It's done really, really well.
I'm having a lot of fun with it. I just finished the story mode, so I haven't really had a chance to do the end game stuff, but overall I love this game. This might be my favorite game so far on Stadia, and sure. I haven't played it elsewhere, but I played it on Stadia, and I love this game. I think, like, I don't know when you're going to watch this, dear viewer, but this is it's on sale right now for, I think, like 50% off, which is a ridiculously good deal. So make sure that you keep that in mind. Lloyd, what are your sum up your final thoughts about it?
Well, I know you don't like giving review scores. I do in some of my videos, and other ones I don't.
Hey, man,
so I'm not going to give I'm not going to give a review score, but I will say this was my game of the year for 2019.
Wow.
I absolutely love the game. I love everything about it. I love how it plays on Stadia. The ability to play it on my laptop or my PC or my Chromecast on my TV is just so amazing. And the multiplayer and just everything around it. I know I did something stupid. I bought the normal regular edition when it first came out because it was on 50% off. And then when it went on 50% off sale, I bought the super deluxe version because it was cheaper than buying the season pass. So now I bought the game twice just to get the season pass, and I'm all in. I'm going to be playing every little bit of DLC, every little bit of content, and hopefully I'll be doing a lot of it with fellow StadiaCast listeners because I'm just absolutely loving the game.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game. If you haven't picked it up yet and you like shooters, you need to pick up this game. It's awesome. And, you know, I have only played it on Stadia, but from what I hear, if you want a really good 60 frames per second experience, Stadia is the place to play it. So thanks for watching, everybody. And Lloyd, thanks for joining me. I don't know if we can call this a review. It's just a discussion about Borderlands 3, but thanks for joining me on this.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's kind of I've done conversational reviews before, and they're always a little bit fun, and they tell a little bit of story. They're not so formulaic. So hopefully, all you listeners and viewers out there really enjoyed this. And if you like this, we'll have to do more in this style. So yeah, thanks Bill for joining me. Thanks everybody for listening. And yeah, go get Borderlands. It's really good on Stadia.
And my secret chili recipe dies with me.